63-year-old Priscilla divorced her husband of 42 years to date a handsome 41-year-old who promised her the adventure she never had. But when her husband discovered the truth about her new boyfriend, what he found made her blood run cold. This is not a love story, it's a warning. The afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Robinson family home in Tulsa, Oklahoma, casting delicate patterns across the mahogany dining table where 3 generations sat frozen in disbelief. Priscilla Robinson, a striking 63-year-old woman with silver-streaked hair styled in elegant twists, had just dropped a bomb that shattered the peaceful Sunday dinner. "I want a divorce," she repeated, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Duke Robinson, 67, sat at the head of the table, his weathered hands gripping his coffee mug so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. 42 years of marriage, and this was how it ended? On a Sunday, over pot roast and collard greens, with their children and grandchildren as witnesses? "Mama, what are you talking about?" Their eldest daughter, Michelle, 40 years old and a mirror image of her mother's younger self, stared across the table with wide eyes. "You and Daddy have been together since forever. This doesn't make any sense." Priscilla straightened her spine, smoothing down the silk blouse she'd bought last week. New clothes for a new life. "It makes perfect sense to me. I've been Duke's wife for 42 years. I've been a mother, a grandmother, a church member, a business partner. But I've never been alive. Not really. Alive?" Duke's voice cracked, revealing the hurt beneath his stoic exterior. "What does that even mean, Priscilla? We built a good life. The construction business, this house, our family." "Boring," Priscilla interrupted, the word hanging in the air like accusation. "Duke, you're a good man. A provider. But you're boring. You've always been boring." While other women were dancing at clubs, going to concerts, feeling butterflies and excitement, I was home with babies and business ledgers. I never got to be young and reckless. I never got to feel what they felt. Their son, Marcus Jr., 38 and his father's business partner, leaned forward with concern etched across his face. "Ma, you're 63 years old. What exactly are you planning to do? Join TikTok? Start clubbing?" "Maybe," Priscilla said defiantly. "Or maybe I'll date younger men who know how to have fun, who can make me feel something other than settled." The word "younger men" caused Duke to stand abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. At 6'2", he still cut an impressive figure despite his age. Broad shoulders from years of construction work, salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed, the kind of solid presence that had always made Priscilla feel safe. But safety, she'd decided, was overrated. "You've lost your mind," Duke said quietly, dangerously. 42 years, Priscilla. We have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. I built Robinson Construction from nothing so you could have everything you wanted. And now you want to throw it away to chase some fantasy about younger men? It's not a fantasy if I make it real, Priscilla countered. She looked around the table at her family, Michelle with tears streaming down her face, Marcus Jr. looking shell-shocked, their youngest daughter Tamika, 35, holding her own children close as if to shield them from this madness. And the grandchildren, ranging from 8 to 16, confused and frightened by the tension crackling through the air. "Grandma, please don't leave Grandpa," whispered Jasmine, the 10-year-old, her voice small and scared. Priscilla's resolve wavered for just a moment. She loved her grandchildren fiercely. But she'd spent 42 years putting everyone else first. Wasn't it her turn? "Baby, Grandma's not leaving you," she said gently. "I'm just finding myself." At 63? Michelle's voice rose with frustration and fear. "Mama, this is crazy. Whatever you're going through, menopause, depression, some kind of crisis, we can get you help. A therapist, a doctor. I don't need fixing." Priscilla stood now too, matching her husband's energy. "I need living. Do you know what it's like to wake up one day and realize you've never done anything wild? Never taken a risk? Never felt your heart race because some man looked at you like you were the only woman in the world?" She looked at Duke. "When's the last time you looked at me like that, Duke? When's the last time we did anything that wasn't scheduled in your planner 2 weeks in advance?" Duke's jaw clenched. "I look at you every day, Priscilla. I've looked at you for 42 years. Just because I don't perform like some movie star doesn't mean I don't see you. But do you want me? Do you desire me? Or am I just there? Part of the furniture, like the couch we've had since 1995? Priscilla's voice cracked with emotion she'd been holding back for months, maybe years. The silence that followed was deafening. Duke had no answer, or perhaps the answer was written in his silence. "I've already spoken to Gladys Miller about representation," Priscilla continued, referring to the most aggressive divorce attorney in Tulsa. "She says with what you've built over 42 years, Oklahoma's equitable distribution laws mean I'm entitled to a significant portion of the marital assets. The house, the business, the investments." "So that's what this is about," Marcus Jr. interjected, his voice cold. "Money. You want to cash out." "This isn't about money," Priscilla insisted, though even she could hear how the protest rang hollow after mentioning assets. "It's about freedom. It's about feeling alive before I'm too old to feel anything at all." Duke sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 67 years. The man who'd built a multi-million-dollar construction empire from a single truck in his own 2 hands now looked defeated. "When did I lose you, Priscilla? When did I stop being enough?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Or perhaps the answer was too painful to speak aloud. He'd never been enough. She'd just been too young and too pregnant and too dependent to admit it. "I'm staying at the Marriott downtown," Priscilla said, gathering her purse, a new designer bag she'd splurged on last week as her first act of rebellion. "I'll send for my things tomorrow." "Mama, please," Tamika spoke for the first time, her voice desperate. "Don't do this. Think about what you're teaching my babies. That marriage is disposable. That commitment means nothing. I'm teaching them that it's never too late to choose yourself," Priscilla said, though even she could hear the defensive edge in her voice. "I'm teaching them that women don't have to settle." She walked toward the door, each step feeling simultaneously like liberation and loss. Behind her, she could hear Michelle crying, could feel the weight of her grandchildren's confused stares, could sense Duke's devastation without even looking back. At the threshold, she paused. Some part of her, the part that had been Duke's wife for 4 decades, wanted to turn around, to say she was sorry, to take it all back. But that part was tired of apologizing for wanting more than what she'd been given. Priscilla, Duke's voice stopped her. When she turned, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years, raw emotion, unguarded and vulnerable. If you walk out that door, if you go through with this, there's no coming back. I won't be here waiting when you realize that whatever you're chasing isn't real. Maybe it's not real, Priscilla said softly. But at least I'll know. At least I'll have tried. She walked out, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. In her car, she sat for a long moment, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Through the window, she could see her family still gathered around the table, Duke's head bowed, Michelle comforting him, the grandchildren crying. For just a second, doubt crept in. Was she being selfish? Crazy? Was she throwing away something precious for a fantasy that might evaporate the moment she touched it? But then she remembered the online dating profile she'd created last month. The matches from younger men who'd called her gorgeous and ageless. The possibility of adventure, passion, excitement, all the things she'd missed by marrying young and building someone else's dream. She started the car and drove away from the life she'd known for 4 decades, towards something unknown and possibly foolish. But it was hers, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, that felt like enough. Behind her, the Robinson family home grew smaller in the rearview mirror, a monument to stability and tradition and everything Priscilla Robinson had decided she no longer wanted to be. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know yet, was that freedom always comes with a price. And sometimes, the cost is more than anyone should have to pay. 3 weeks after the announcement, Priscilla sat in the upscale bar of the Mayo Hotel in downtown Tulsa, nursing a cosmopolitan she'd ordered because it seemed like the kind of drink a woman reinventing herself should drink. The cocktail was too sweet, too pink, too trying hard, much like how she felt in the designer jeans and fitted sweater she'd purchased specifically for tonight's date. Her phone buzzed. Here. Parking now. Can't wait to see you. Charlie. Priscilla checked her reflection in her compact mirror for the 10th time. At 63, she'd maintained herself well, regular Pilates classes, good genes, and expensive skincare had kept her looking younger than her years. Her silver hair, which she'd almost dyed back to black before deciding to own it, was styled in soft waves. She looked good. She looked ready. But ready for what, exactly? The dating app, Silver Connections, designed for mature singles seeking meaningful relationships, had yielded dozens of matches. Most were age-appropriate, retired doctors, widowed businessmen, divorced lawyers, all in their 60s and 70s. Boring. Safe. Exactly what she was trying to escape. Then Charlie's profile had appeared. 41 years old, which the app had flagged as outside your preferred age range, but Priscilla had clicked anyway. His photos showed a handsome man with warm brown skin, a carefully groomed beard, athletic build, and a smile that promised adventure. His profile said he was a freelance consultant who loved travel, fine dining, and making every moment count. Their messaging had been electric. Charlie wrote with enthusiasm and charm, asking about her dreams and aspirations rather than her grandchildren and retirement plans. He'd called her beautiful, vibrant, fascinating. He'd made her feel seen in ways Duke never had. Priscilla. She looked up to find Charlie standing beside her table, and her breath caught. The photos hadn't done him justice. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with an easy confidence in the way he moved. He wore dark jeans and a fitted blazer over a crisp white shirt, casual but polished. When he smiled, deep dimples appeared in his cheeks. "Charlie." She stood, awkwardly offering her hand, but he pulled her into a gentle hug instead. "You're even more stunning in person," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "That dress is incredible on you." It wasn't a dress, it was a sweater and jeans, but Priscilla didn't correct him. She was too busy processing the fact that this attractive 41-year-old man was actually here, actually interested, actually making her feel like she was 30 again. They sat, and Charlie ordered a bourbon, neat, confident, the kind of order that suggested sophistication. He leaned forward, giving her his complete attention in a way that felt intoxicating. "So," he said, "tell me about the real Priscilla Robinson. Not the dating profile version. The woman who had the courage to start over at 63. And Priscilla found herself talking. Really talking. About feeling invisible in her marriage, about watching her youth slip away while she raised children and supported Duke's business dreams. About waking up at 63 and realizing she'd never been to a concert, never danced until dawn, never felt the thrill of spontaneous romance. "Duke is a good man," she heard herself say, feeling the need to defend the husband she was divorcing. "He provided, he was faithful, he built a successful business. But he never made me feel alive." Does that make sense? "Perfect sense," Charlie said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "You know what I think? I think you gave 42 years to someone else's dreams. Now it's time for your dreams." And Priscilla, his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, "I'd be honored to help you live them." The evening flew by. One drink became 2, then dinner, then a walk along the Arkansas River despite the October chill. Charlie was attentive, funny, and genuinely interested in everything she said. He told her about his work as a consultant, vague on details but enthusiastic about the freedom it provided. He talked about travel, adventure, living life without regrets. "I've been to 43 countries," he said as they walked. "And you know what I've learned? Life is too short to play it safe. You have to grab experiences with both hands and squeeze every drop of joy out of them." 43 countries, Priscilla breathed, awed. She'd barely left Oklahoma except for one cruise to Mexico years ago that Duke had spent seasick in the cabin. "And I want to take you to number 44, Charlie said, stopping to face her. In the glow of the riverside lights, he looked impossibly handsome. "What do you say, Priscilla? Will you let me show you the world?" Her practical side, the part that had been Duke's wife for 4 decades, whispered caution. This was too fast, too good to be true. But the part of her that had walked away from her marriage 3 weeks ago, the part that was tired of being practical and sensible and boring, that part said yes. "I'd like that," she said softly. Charlie's smile was triumphant. He leaned in, and Priscilla's heart hammered as she realized he was going to kiss her. 42 years with one man, and now this. She closed her eyes, nervous as a teenager, and felt his lips brush hers, soft, confident, promising. When they parted, Priscilla felt dizzy. "Wow," she whispered. Just wait, Charlie murmured. That's just the beginning. They made plans for the weekend, a trip to Dallas for a Cowboys game. Charlie insisted on handling everything: tickets, hotel, restaurant reservations. "Let me spoil you," he'd said. "You deserve it." Driving back to her hotel room later that night, Priscilla felt giddy. This was what she'd been missing. This excitement, this anticipation, this feeling of being desired not as a wife or mother or grandmother, but as a woman. She texted her daughter Michelle, "Had a wonderful evening. I'm happy. Please try to understand." Michelle's response came quickly: "Mom, please be careful. You don't know this man. Have you thought about what you're giving up?" But Priscilla didn't want to think about what she was giving up. She wanted to think about what she was gaining. What she didn't know, what she couldn't see through the romantic haze, was that Charlie had his own texts to send that night. Sitting in his modest apartment in a less glamorous part of Tulsa, he pulled up his phone and messaged someone saved in his contacts as M. Hookset. "She's perfect, loaded, lonely, and desperate to feel young again. Mentioned the husband owns Robinson Construction. I looked it up. Duke Robinson is worth at least $15 million. She's already talking to a divorce attorney. This is going to be easy money. Give me 3 months, maybe 4, and we split the take 60-40 like usual." The response came back: "Don't get cocky. Older marks can be tricky. They've seen more, they're harder to fool long term." Charlie typed back, confident, "Trust me. This one's different. She's so hungry for excitement, she's not asking any questions. By the time I'm done, she'll hand me half of everything just to keep me around. Then we disappear, and she's left with nothing but regrets and a divorce from a rich husband. Perfect score." He set down his phone and looked at the photos of Priscilla he'd taken secretly during their walk. Not bad for 63, he thought clinically. And desperate enough to be easy to manipulate. He'd played this game before: lonely older women, recent divorcees, wealthy widows. They all wanted the same thing: validation, excitement, proof they were still desirable. Charlie had made a comfortable living providing that fantasy, right up until the moment he drained their bank accounts. Priscilla Robinson would be his biggest score yet. And she'd never see it coming. Because right now, lying in her hotel bed, Priscilla was smiling at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Charlie had looked at her, touched her hand, kissed her by the river. For the first time in 42 years, she felt alive. She had no idea that the man who made her feel that way was counting the days until he could destroy her. The Dallas Cowboys game was everything Priscilla had never known she wanted. Charlie had secured club-level seats at AT&T Stadium, where they sat surrounded by excitement and energy that made her feel decades younger. He'd bought her a Cowboys jersey with Robinson printed on the back, making her laugh. "Your name or your soon-to-be ex-husband's name?" he'd teased. "Mine," she'd insisted. "It's my name too. I earned it." Throughout the game, Charlie was the perfect companion, explaining plays when she was confused, cheering with genuine enthusiasm, keeping her champagne glass filled. He introduced her to people in the neighboring seats as "my beautiful Priscilla," never mentioning her age, never making her feel like anything but his equal. After the game, They'd gone to a steakhouse where Charlie ordered with the confidence of someone who belonged in expensive restaurants. He told stories about his travels, summering in Greece, skiing in Switzerland, backpacking through Southeast Asia. His life sounded impossibly glamorous compared to her 42 years of PDA meetings and Sunday dinners. "Tell me more about Duke," Charlie said as they waited for dessert, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "You mentioned he built a construction company?" Priscilla hesitated. Talking about Duke felt like betrayal, especially here with Charlie. But something in Charlie's expression was so open, so genuinely curious, that she found herself answering. "Robinson Construction," she said. "He started with one truck in 1982, just him and a dream. Now it's one of the biggest construction firms in Oklahoma, commercial buildings, government contracts, the works. He's worth, well, let's just say the divorce is going to be complicated." "I can imagine," Charlie said sympathetically. "That must be stressful, dealing with lawyers and financial stuff." "My attorney says I'm entitled to at least half of everything we built together. The business, the house, investments, probably $7 or $8 million when it's all settled." Priscilla lowered her voice, aware of how discussing money in public was tacky. But Charlie had asked, and she wanted to be honest with him. She didn't notice the way his eyes lit up at the figure. Didn't see the calculation happening behind his sympathetic expression. Didn't catch the slight smile he suppressed when she mentioned $7 or $8 million. "You deserve every penny," Charlie said firmly, reaching for her hand. "You spent 42 years building that with him. That's your money, Priscilla. Your security. Don't let him or anyone make you feel guilty about taking what's yours." His words felt validating. Duke's attorney had been pushing for a smaller settlement, suggesting that since Duke built the business before their marriage, she wasn't entitled to as much. But Priscilla had been there, keeping books, hosting clients, raising their children while Duke worked 16-hour days. She'd earned her share. "My daughter Michelle thinks I'm being greedy," Priscilla admitted. "She says I should think about the business, about Marcus Jr.'s future with the company. But why should I sacrifice again? Haven't I sacrificed enough?" "You've sacrificed everything," Charlie agreed. "And now it's your turn. Your turn to have adventures, to live the life you want." Speaking of which, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "How do you feel about Nashville next weekend? I have a friend with a box at the Grand Ole Opry." "Nashville?" Priscilla's heart raced. She'd always wanted to visit Nashville. "I couldn't possibly." "Why not?" "You're free now, Priscilla. That's the whole point, isn't it? Being free to say yes instead of always saying no." Charlie's smile was irresistible. "Come with me. Let me show you more of the world." And Priscilla said yes, because saying yes felt revolutionary. Saying yes felt like the antidote to 42 years of "not right now," and "we can't afford it," and "maybe next year." The next 2 months became a blur of experiences. Nashville turned into Memphis, which turned into New Orleans. Charlie always paid for everything, brushing off her offers to contribute with charming insistence that he wanted to treat her. They stayed in boutique hotels, ate at restaurants Priscilla had only seen on cooking shows, danced in jazz clubs until 2 a.m. Charlie was attentive, romantic, and seemingly inexhaustible. He made her feel beautiful, desirable, young. In his arms on dance floors, in his bed in hotel rooms, Priscilla felt reborn. This was what she'd been missing. This was what life could be. Meanwhile, her phone filled with messages from her family that she increasingly ignored. Michelle, Mom, you've been gone every weekend for 6 weeks. The kids are asking where you are. Daddy looks terrible. Marcus Jr., Ma, we need to talk about the business. Your attorney is demanding financial records that could tank deals we have pending. Can you please slow this down? Tamika, Mama, I saw pictures on Facebook of you in New Orleans with some man. People are talking. This is embarrassing. Even Duke texted, his messages short and pained. Priscilla, can we talk? Please. Just talk. But Priscilla didn't want to talk. Talking meant facing reality, and reality was boring. Reality was guilt and obligation and all the things she was trying to escape. Don't let them guilt you, Charlie advised when she mentioned her family's concerns. They were in Memphis, sitting by the hotel pool, and Charlie was rubbing sunscreen on her shoulders with intimate familiarity. They're scared of losing their meal ticket. Your husband's scared of losing his unpaid accountant and hostess. Your kids are scared their inheritance might shrink. But what about you, Priscilla? What about what you want? You're right, she said, though something about his characterization of her family stung. They weren't just worried about money, were they? They were worried about her. Weren't they? I need to ask you something, Charlie said, his tone shifting to serious. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Where is this going? Us, I mean. Because Priscilla, I'm falling for you. Hard. But I need to know if you're really done with your old life, or if I'm just a phase. The vulnerability in his voice melted her. You're not a phase, she said quickly. Charlie, you've given me more in 2 months than I had in 42 years. I'm falling for you too. Then let me ask you something else. His eyes held hers intensely. Have you thought about after the divorce? About what happens when you're free and have your settlement? Sometimes, Priscilla admitted. She hadn't wanted to think too far ahead, afraid of jinxing this happiness. Because I have, Charlie said. I've thought about us traveling the world together. Really traveling, Europe, Asia, South America. I've thought about waking up in Paris with you, watching the sunset in Santorini, dancing in Rio. But that kind of freedom takes resources. And your attorney said you're looking at 7 or 8 million? There it was, the first direct mention of her money. Something in Priscilla's chest tightened slightly, but Charlie's expression was so earnest, so full of hope for their shared future, that she pushed the discomfort away. Probably, she said carefully. Once the assets are divided and everything's settled. That's enough, Charlie said, excitement building in his voice. Priscilla, that's enough for us to live the life we want. To really be free. All you have to do is make sure that divorce attorney fights for what you deserve. Don't let Duke guilt you into accepting less. Don't let your kids talk you into protecting their inheritance. This is your money, your chance, your life. He kissed her then, passionate and possessive, and Priscilla kissed him back, pushing away the small voice in her head that whispered this was moving too fast, that his interest in her finances felt somehow wrong. She was in love. She was alive. And she wasn't going to let doubt ruin it. What Priscilla didn't see was the text Charlie sent later that evening while she slept. She's in deep. Talking about the divorce settlement like it's already ours. I'm thinking we go for the whole amount. Why settle for half when we can get it all? I'll convince her to liquidate everything, put it in accounts she controls, then we make our move. The husband's attorneys are pushing back, which is good, makes her more defensive, more determined to take him for everything. Another month, 2 tops, and we're golden. The response: don't push too hard too fast. You get greedy, that's when marks wake up. Charlie smiled at his phone. Trust me. This one's too far gone. She'd give me her soul if I asked nicely. And maybe he was right. Because lying in that Memphis hotel bed, Priscilla was already imagining their future together, a future built on the ashes of her marriage and funded by the fortune Duke had spent 4 decades building. She was too in love to see the trap closing around her. Too intoxicated by adventure to notice she was being hunted. Too determined to feel young again to realize she was being played by someone who did this for a living. The whirlwind would continue for another month. And by the time Priscilla finally saw the truth, it would be far too late to save herself. Thanksgiving arrived, bringing with it an unavoidable confrontation. Michelle had called 17 times in 3 days, her messages escalating from pleading to demanding. Finally, she'd played the grandchildren card. Mama, Jasmine is crying because her grandmother won't be here for Thanksgiving. What do I tell her? That you're too busy playing teenager with your boy toy to care about your family? The message had stung enough that Priscilla agreed to come to dinner, but only if she could bring Charlie. Michelle's silence on the other end of the phone spoke volumes, but she'd eventually agreed. Fine. Bring him. Let us meet this man who's apparently worth destroying our family over. Now, standing on Michelle's porch in Broken Arrow, Priscilla felt nervous in a way she hadn't anticipated. Charlie stood beside her, looking polished in slacks and a sweater, his hand warm on the small of her back. You okay? He asked, sensing her tension. They're going to hate you, Priscilla said honestly. It's not fair, but they will. Let them, Charlie said with confidence. All that matters is that you love me. Right? Right, Priscilla echoed, though something about the way he said it felt slightly off. Too practiced, maybe. Too smooth. The door opened, and Michelle stood there, 40 years old and looking exhausted. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore an apron over jeans and a sweater. Behind her, Priscilla could hear the sounds of family, children laughing, Duke's deep voice, someone watching football. Mama, Michelle said, her voice carefully neutral. Then her eyes slid to Charlie, and something cold and assessing entered her expression. This must be Charlie. Michelle, this is Charlie Morrison. Charlie, my daughter Michelle. Priscilla heard the defensive edge in her own voice. Charlie extended his hand with easy charm. Michelle, I've heard so much about you. Priscilla talks about her family constantly. Michelle shook his hand briefly, her grip perfunctory. I wish I could say the same. Mama's been pretty scarce lately. She stepped back, allowing them in. Everyone's in the family room. Fair warning, this is going to be awkward. That was an understatement. The moment Priscilla and Charlie entered the family room, conversation stopped. Duke sat in his usual recliner, looking smaller than Priscilla remembered. He'd lost weight, she realized with a pang of guilt. His beard was grayer, his eyes tired. When he saw her, something flickered across his face, hope, pain, resignation, before he schooled his features into neutrality. Marcus Jr. stood by the fireplace, his jaw tight. Tamika sat on the couch with her husband and kids, her expression carefully blank. And the grandchildren, 5 sets of eyes ranging from 8 to 16, stared at Charlie with open curiosity and suspicion. "Everyone," Priscilla said, her voice shaky, "this is Charlie." "The boyfriend," Marcus Jr. said flatly. "The reason Grandma's divorcing Grandpa." "Marcus," Michelle hissed, but the damage was done. Charlie, to his credit, didn't flinch. He stepped forward, extending his hand to Duke first, a bold move that Priscilla hadn't expected. "Sir, I know this situation is complicated, but I want you to know I have nothing but respect for you and what you've built." Duke looked at Charlie's extended hand for a long moment before standing slowly. He was 4 inches taller than Charlie and probably 30 pounds heavier despite his weight loss. When he finally shook Charlie's hand, his grip was crushing. "You're 41, Duke said, his voice low and dangerous. "My wife is 63. You want to tell me what a 41-year-old man wants with a woman my age? And before you answer, know that I've been in business long enough to smell a con from a mile away." "Duke," Priscilla protested, but Charlie held up a hand. "It's a fair question," Charlie said smoothly. "I won't pretend the age difference isn't significant. But sir, your wife is remarkable. She's intelligent, vibrant, full of life. Age is just a number when you meet someone who makes you feel alive. Surely you felt that way once too?" It was a clever answer, Priscilla thought, respectful but subtly accusatory, suggesting Duke had lost what Charlie had found. But she watched Duke's face darken and realized Charlie had miscalculated. "I felt that way 42 years ago," Duke said quietly. "And I still feel it every time I look at her. The difference is, I was there for the midnight feedings, the sick kids, the business struggles, the hard years. I earned the right to love her." "What have you earned, son?" The tension in the room was suffocating. Michelle broke it by announcing dinner was ready, and everyone moved toward the dining room with obvious relief. As they settled around the table, a beautiful spread of turkey, ham, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, all Priscilla's traditional recipes that Michelle had labored over, the awkwardness intensified. Duke said grace, his voice rough with emotion, "Lord, we thank you for this food and for family, even when that family is broken. We thank you for the years we've had together and ask for wisdom in the days ahead. We pray for healing, for understanding, and for protection from those who might wish us harm. Amen." "Amen," the family echoed, except for Charlie, who'd closed his eyes respectfully but hadn't bowed his head. Dinner was painful. The grandchildren asked innocent questions that landed like bombs. "Grandma, are you moving back home soon?" 8-year-old Jasmine asked. "Why is Mr. Charlie here instead of Grandpa sitting next to you?" 12-year-old Marcus III wanted to know. "Mom says you're getting a divorce," 16-year-old Shanice said, her tone accusing. "Is that true? You're just giving up on Grandpa?" Priscilla tried to answer gently, but every response felt inadequate. How do you explain to children that sometimes love isn't enough? That sometimes people need different things? That their grandmother spent 42 years being one person and wanted to try being someone else? Charlie tried to help, engaging the kids with questions about school and sports, but his efforts felt forced. He was trying too hard, and the family noticed. It was during dessert, Michelle's famous sweet potato pie, that things escalated. Marcus Jr., after his third beer, finally let loose. "So Charlie," he said, his voice deceptively casual, "Mama mentioned you're a consultant. What exactly do you consult on?" Charlie didn't miss a beat. "Business development, mostly. I work with companies looking to expand internationally. It's freelance, which allows me flexibility to travel." "Interesting," Marcus Jr. continued. "What companies have you worked with recently? Any I might have heard of?" Priscilla saw Charlie's jaw tighten slightly. "Most are under NDA, non-disclosure agreements. I can't discuss clients." "Convenient," Marcus Jr. said. "And where'd you go to school? What's your background?" "Marcus, stop," Priscilla interjected. "This isn't an interrogation." "Isn't it?" Tamika joined in. "Mama, you're planning to divorce Daddy and take half of everything he built. Don't we have a right to know who you're doing it for? What this man's really after?" "I'm not after anything," Charlie said, his charm fraying slightly. "I care about your mother." "Do you?" Duke's voice cut through the argument like a blade. He set down his fork with deliberate precision and fixed Charlie with a stare that had intimidated contractors and business rivals for decades. "Because from where I'm sitting, you showed up right when my wife decided she wanted a divorce. Right when she started talking about her settlement. And now you're taking her on expensive trips, showering her with attention, making her feel special. You know what we call that in business? Grooming." "Daddy." Priscilla stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough. Charlie is not grooming me. I'm a grown woman who made a choice. To throw away 42 years for a man you've known for what? 3 months?" Duke stood too, his voice rising for the first time. "Priscilla, I've kept quiet because I thought you needed space. I thought maybe if I gave you time, you'd come to your senses. But watching you parade this boy around my family, watching you defend him while he sits at my daughter's table eating food made from your recipes, I can't stay quiet anymore." "Your family?" Priscilla's voice shook with anger. "They're my family too, Duke. And this is exactly why I'm leaving, because everything is always about you. Your business, your house, your legacy. What about me? What about what I want?" "What do you want, Mama?" Michelle asked, tears streaming down her face. "Really? Because it looks like you want to destroy everything we built together. You want to hurt Daddy, embarrass us, and for what? So some young man can take you to football games?" "It's more than that," Priscilla insisted, but even to her own ears, the protest sounded weak. Charlie stood, placing a hand on Priscilla's shoulder. "Maybe we should go. This clearly isn't productive." "Yeah, you should go," Marcus Jr. said, standing as well. "But Mama should stay. We need to talk to her. Alone." I'm not a child, Marcus, Priscilla snapped. I don't need you to protect me from my own choices. Someone needs to, Tamika said quietly. Mama, I love you. We all love you. But you're not thinking clearly. This man, she gestured at Charlie, shows up out of nowhere, and suddenly you're talking about taking half of Daddy's business? About liquidating assets? About moving money around? Doesn't that seem suspicious to you? Charlie has nothing to do with the divorce, Priscilla said, though the words felt rehearsed. I wanted this before I met him. Did you? Duke's question was soft but devastating. Because I remember 3 months ago, before you met him, you were talking about us taking a cruise for our anniversary. You were planning Jasmine's birthday party. You were researching recipes for Thanksgiving. You were here, Priscilla. With us. With me. Then he showed up, and suddenly everything we built together means nothing? The truth in his words hit harder than Priscilla wanted to admit. Had she wanted the divorce before Charlie? Or had Charlie's attention simply given her permission to want what she'd been too afraid to reach for? I can't do this, Priscilla said, grabbing her purse. Charlie, let's go. As they headed for the door, Duke's voice stopped her one more time. Priscilla, I had my attorney do some checking. You want to know what he found? Priscilla froze, her hand on the doorknob. Charlie Morrison isn't a freelance consultant, Duke continued, his voice heavy with the weight of knowledge that brings no joy. There's no business license, no LLC, no tax records of consulting income. But there are records of 3 civil suits in the last 10 years, 2 in Texas, 1 in Arkansas. Women claiming fraud. Promising them relationships, getting access to their money, then disappearing. The cases were settled out of court. Sealed records. But the pattern's there if you know where to look. The room went silent. Priscilla felt the floor shift beneath her feet. That's a lie, Charlie said, but his voice had changed. The smooth confidence had cracked, revealing something harder underneath. You're making things up to turn her against me. Am I? Duke pulled out his phone, scrolling to something. This is Sharon Mitchell in Houston. Widow, 68. Met you on a dating app in 2019. You promised her the world, convinced her to take her late husband's life insurance settlement and invest in your business opportunities. 2 months later, you disappeared with $340,000. She settled rather than go through the public shame of admitting she'd been conned. Charlie's face had gone carefully blank. Priscilla looked between her husband and her boyfriend, feeling reality tilt dangerously. Duke's lying, Charlie said, reaching for Priscilla's hand. Baby, he's desperate. He'll say anything to keep you. This is Ruth Washington in Little Rock, Duke continued, swiping to another page. 61. Divorced. You met her in 2021. Same story, romance, promises, convinced her to liquidate assets from her settlement. She lost $180,000 before her son hired a private investigator. The investigation found 2 other women in Arkansas you'd run the same con on. Stop, Priscilla whispered, but Duke wasn't finished. And this is Janet Shen in Dallas. 55. Met you just last year. You were still seeing her when you started messaging Priscilla. Janet got smart, backed out before you could get her money. She's the one who connected the dots, found the other victims. She's been trying to warn women about you on dating apps, but you keep changing your profile. Duke looked up from his phone, his eyes locked on Charlie with cold fury. Your real name isn't even Charlie Morrison. It's Charles Washington. You're 43, not 41. You have a partner, probably the one managing the money you steal, and you've been running this con for at least 8 years that we can prove. You target older women in the midst of divorces or recent widows. You make them feel young and alive and special. Then you convince them to liquidate their assets, isolate them from their families, and drain them dry. You're a predator, son. And you picked the wrong family to prey on. The silence that followed was broken only by Michelle's quiet sobbing and Jasmine's confused questions that Tamika was trying to answer. Priscilla stared at Charles, whoever he was, and watched his face cycle through emotions, shock, anger, calculation. Priscilla, he said finally, his voice different now, harder, colder. Are you going to believe your husband's manufactured evidence, or are you going to believe me? The man who's shown you more life in 3 months than you had in 42 years. It was the wrong thing to say. The calculated nature of it, the immediate pivot to manipulation, the way he'd phrased it as an ultimatum, Priscilla felt scales falling from her eyes. How much did you take from them? She asked quietly. Sharon, Ruth, Janet. How much? I didn't take anything from anyone, Charlie insisted. Those women made bad investments. That's not my fault. How much were you planning to take from me? Charlie's jaw clenched. For a moment, Priscilla thought he might keep lying. Then something in his expression shifted, the mask slipping away to reveal the predator underneath. All of it, he said simply. Every penny you could get from the divorce. You were so easy, Priscilla. So desperate to feel young and special. You would have given me anything I asked for. You practically begged me to take it. The cruelty in his voice, the casual contempt, cut deeper than any knife. Priscilla felt her legs weaken, felt Michelle catch her arm to steady her. Get out, Duke said, his voice deadly quiet. Get out of my daughter's house before I forget I'm a Christian man and do something I'll regret. Charlie laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You think you've won? You haven't won anything, old man. She still wanted to leave you. I didn't create that. I just exploited it. Your marriage was already dead. I was just helping myself to the corpse. Marcus Jr. moved then, fast and angry, but Duke caught his arm. Let him go, son. He's not worth it. Charlie straightened his jacket, his composure returning. He looked at Priscilla one last time, and there was no warmth in his eyes, no affection. Just cold assessment. You know the saddest part, he said. You really are boring, Priscilla. Just like your boring husband in your boring life. I've been faking interest in your endless stories about your boring past for 3 months. The only interesting thing about you is your bank account. And I almost had it. He walked out, leaving devastation in his wake. Priscilla stood trembling in Michelle's foyer, surrounded by her family, feeling the full weight of what she'd almost done. Almost destroyed her marriage. Almost devastated her family. Almost lost everything Duke had spent 42 years building. And for what? A con man who'd never cared about her at all. "Mama," Michelle said gently, guiding her to the couch. The grandchildren had been ushered upstairs, sensing the adults needed space. "Mama, it's okay. You're okay." But she wasn't okay. Priscilla put her head in her hands and wept, for her own foolishness, for the hurt she'd caused, for the marriage she'd nearly thrown away, for the woman she'd become in her desperate attempt to feel young again. Duke stood across the room, watching her cry, his own eyes wet. After a long moment, he crossed to her and knelt down, his bad knees protesting, so he could look her in the face. "Priscilla," he said softly. "Look at me." She couldn't. The shame was too great. But he gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I still love you," he said simply. "I'm hurt. I'm angry. But I still love you. And if you want to try to fix this, to fix us, I'm willing. If you don't, if you really want the divorce, I'll give it to you. But not because of him. Because you choose it. Can you tell me what you really want?" Priscilla looked at the man she'd been married to for 42 years. Really looked at him. She saw the gray in his beard that matched hers, the lines around his eyes from years of hard work and laughter, the strong hands that had built an empire and rocked their babies to sleep. She saw steadiness and loyalty and love, boring, perhaps, but real. And she realized she had no idea what she wanted anymore. Charlie had been a fantasy, but walking away from Duke had been real. Could she undo that damage? Did she even want to? "I don't know," she whispered honestly. "Duke, I don't know." He nodded slowly, standing with effort. "Then figure it out." "But Priscilla?" "Do it away from men with pretty words and empty promises. Do it honestly. Because 42 years deserves at least that much." He left then, walking out of his daughter's house into the cold November night, leaving Priscilla surrounded by her children and the wreckage of her choices. The fantasy was over. But the consequences were just beginning. The days following Thanksgiving blurred together in a haze of shame and confusion. Priscilla moved out of the hotel. She couldn't afford it anymore, not when reality had reasserted itself so brutally, and into Michelle's guest room. Her daughter had insisted despite her own hurt and anger, saying family stuck together even when family made catastrophic mistakes. The investigation into Charles Washington, expanded like a dark stain. Duke's attorney, a bulldog named Vernon Price who'd handled Robinson Construction's legal matters for 20 years, had compiled a file that made Priscilla physically ill to read. Charles Washington, age 43. Born in Little Rock, Arkansas. High school dropout. No college education. A string of minor cons in his 20s, credit card fraud, identity theft, small-time scams. Then he discovered his real talent, lonely women with money. He works with a partner, Vernon explained during a meeting in Duke's office at Robinson Construction. Priscilla had agreed to attend after Duke assured her he just wanted her to understand the full scope of what had almost happened. "We think it's a woman, possibly a girlfriend or wife. She handles the financial side, setting up shell accounts, moving money, covering their tracks. He handles the romance. They target women on dating apps, usually in the midst of major life changes. Divorces, deaths of spouses, relocations. Times when women are vulnerable and isolated. Vernon clicked through slides on his laptop, showing photos of women, 7 that they'd identified so far. Sharon. Ruth. Janet. 4 others whose names Priscilla tried to memorize as a form of penance. All between 55 and 70. All had lost money. The amounts ranged from $80,000 to $400,000. Sharon Mitchell was the worst case, Vernon continued. Widow. Her husband died of cancer. Charles, found her 3 months after the funeral. Pursued her hard. Within 2 months, she was in love. He convinced her that her late husband would have wanted her to be happy, to live life fully. Got her to liquidate the life insurance policy, $340,000, and invested in what he called a can't-miss opportunity. An overseas real estate development in Costa Rica. The development didn't exist. The bank accounts the money went to were offshore shells. By the time Sharon realized she'd been conned, Charles was gone and the money was unrecoverable. Priscilla felt bile rise in her throat. Is she okay? Vernon's expression softened. She lost her home. Had to move in with her son in Florida. The shame of it, the publicity, the judgment from her community, it broke something in her. Her son says she's not the same woman she was. How much was he going to take from me? Priscilla asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Duke answered, his voice careful and neutral. Based on his pattern, probably all of it. Your settlement would have been approximately $7 million after taxes and legal fees. He would have worked on you for another month or 2, isolating you further from family, building your dependence on him. Then he would have presented an opportunity, maybe the travel company he mentioned, or an investment property, something that sounded exciting and aligned with your dreams. You would have trusted him enough by then to liquidate the settlement, put it in accounts he could access, and then. Duke snapped his fingers. Gone. And you'd be left with nothing. No money, no marriage, no family to fall back on because you'd burned those bridges. The weight of what she'd almost done pressed down on Priscilla like a physical force. $7 million. 42 years of Duke's labor. Her children's inheritance. Her grandchildren's college funds. Her own security. All of it almost gone because a handsome man had made her feel young. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Priscilla asked Duke. When you found out about him, why wait until Thanksgiving? Duke leaned back in his chair, looking older than his 67 years. Because you wouldn't have believed me. 3 weeks ago when Vernon brought me this information, I wanted to drive to your hotel and show you everything. But my attorney said you'd think I was lying, that you'd see it as a desperate attempt to manipulate you. We had to wait until you saw him with your own eyes, in a context where his mask might slip. Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by family, under pressure, that's when cons make mistakes. And if he hadn't made a mistake? Priscilla whispered. If he'd kept up the act? Then I would have let you go, Duke said simply. I would have given you the divorce, given you your settlement, and prayed you'd wake up before he destroyed you. Because Priscilla, even hurt and angry as I am, I love you too much to watch you get conned and do nothing. The statement broke something in Priscilla. Tears came, hot and ashamed, and this time she didn't try to stop them. Michelle, sitting beside her, put an arm around her shoulders. "What do I do now?" Priscilla asked through her tears. "How do I fix this?" "First," Vernon said, clicking to a new slide, "we need to address the divorce proceedings. Your attorney, Gladys Miller, has been aggressively pursuing a settlement that would have been devastating to Robinson Construction. Based on what we now know about Charles Washington's influence, we believe he was coaching you to push for maximum liquidation, which would have served his purposes. Do you want to continue with the divorce?" Priscilla looked at Duke. His face was carefully neutral, giving away nothing. He wasn't going to influence her decision. After 42 years of marriage, he was leaving this choice entirely to her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I know I was wrong about Charlie. I know I almost made a terrible mistake. But Duke, the reasons I wanted to leave, feeling invisible, feeling like my life was over, those were real. Even if the solution I chose was disastrous." "Then let's table the divorce question," Vernon suggested. "You don't have to decide today. We can pause proceedings, give you time to think clearly without outside influence. In the meantime, we need to decide whether to press charges against Charles Washington." "What would that accomplish?" Priscilla asked. "It might stop him from doing this to other women," Michelle said quietly. "Mama, you got lucky. Daddy caught it in time. The next woman might not be so fortunate." The thought of another woman, another Sharon or Ruth, falling into Charlie's trap because Priscilla was too embarrassed to come forward made her feel sick. "What would pressing charges involve?" she asked Vernon. "You'd need to give a statement to the police. Detail the relationship, the timeline, any financial discussions or requests. Since he didn't actually take money from you, the charges would be attempted fraud. The district attorney would decide if there's enough evidence to prosecute. Given his history and the other victims, there's a good chance they'd pursue it. But Priscilla," Vernon's tone turned serious, "it would be public. Your family, your church, your community, everyone would know. The humiliation you're feeling now? It would be magnified. Are you prepared for that?" Priscilla thought about facing her friends at church, about the whispers and judgment, about her grandchildren hearing the gossip at school. She thought about her name in the newspaper, her stupidity on display for all of Tulsa to see. Then she thought about the next woman. The next Sharon Mitchell losing everything. The next widow or divorcee being preyed upon by a man who saw vulnerability as opportunity. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "I'll press charges." Duke's expression showed something that might have been pride. Over the next week, Priscilla gave her statement to Detective Sarah Williams at the Tulsa Police Department. She detailed every date, every trip, every conversation about money. She handed over text messages, photos, receipts from the hotels and restaurants Charlie had paid for with credit cards that turned out to be under fake names. "He's good," Detective Williams said, reviewing the file. "Knows how to stay just on the legal side of most things. The credit card fraud is our best bet. Using fake identities is a felony. Combined with the pattern of behavior and statements from the other victims, we might be able to build a case." "Will you catch him?" Priscilla asked. "Eventually. Men like Charles Washington get cocky. They think they're too smart to get caught. They make mistakes. Detective Williams closed the file. Mrs. Robinson, I have to tell you, you're one of the lucky ones. Most victims don't have a husband with resources to investigate. They don't have family to catch them before they fall. You came very close to disaster, but you're going to be okay. Not everyone is. The words should have been comforting, but they felt like indictment. She was lucky. Lucky she'd married a smart, successful man who loved her enough to save her from her own foolishness. Lucky her children cared enough to intervene. Lucky, lucky, lucky. What about the women who weren't lucky? That evening, sitting in Michelle's kitchen drinking tea while her daughter cooked dinner and the grandchildren did homework at the table, Priscilla asked the question that had been haunting her. Do you think I'm a bad person? Michelle stopped stirring the pot on the stove and turned to face her mother. No, Mama. I think you're a person who made a bad choice. There's a difference. I almost destroyed everything, Priscilla said. Your father's business, your inheritances, my own security. All because I wanted to feel special. You are special, Jasmine piped up from the table, looking up from her math homework. You're my grandma. The simple statement from her 10-year-old granddaughter cracked something in Priscilla's chest. She crossed to Jasmine and pulled her into a hug. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered. Grandma made some mistakes. But I'm going to do better. Does that mean you're not leaving Grandpa? Jasmine asked hopefully. Priscilla didn't have an answer. Michelle intervened gently, redirecting Jasmine back to her homework, giving Priscilla space to not have to explain something she didn't understand herself. Later that night, lying in Michelle's guest bed, Priscilla's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her heart seized. What if it was Charlie? What if he was angry about the police investigation? What if he was threatening her? But the message read, "This is Sharon Mitchell. Detective Williams gave me your number, said you might want to talk to someone who'd been through it. If you need to talk, I'm here." Priscilla stared at the message for a long time before responding, "Thank you. I'm so sorry for what happened to you." Sharon's response came quickly, "Don't apologize. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't mine either. Men like Charles Washington are professionals. They know exactly which buttons to push. The shame you're feeling? He planned for that too. The shame keeps us quiet, keeps us from warning others. Don't let him win that way." They texted for an hour, two women who'd never met but who shared the bond of near destruction by the same predator. Sharon told her story, the grief of losing her husband, the loneliness, how Charlie had seemed like a miracle. How he'd known exactly what to say to make her feel alive again. The worst part, Sharon wrote, wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that everything I felt was manufactured. Every moment of joy, every laugh, every time he made me feel beautiful, it was all calculated. He didn't love me. He didn't even like me. I was just a mark. Priscilla understood viscerally. The Dallas Cowboys game. Memphis. New Orleans. Every kiss, every word of affection, every moment she'd thought they were building something real, it had all been theater. Charlie had been performing, and she'd been too desperate for the fantasy to see the script. How did you move past it? Priscilla asked. I haven't, Sharon admitted. Not completely. I'm in therapy. I've reconnected with my kids, though the relationship is damaged. I volunteer at a women's shelter, helping other women identify the signs of financial abuse. But Priscilla, here's what I learned. The man who lied to you doesn't define your worth. The mistake you almost made doesn't erase the life you've lived. You get to decide who you are after this. Don't let him take that too. The words settled into Priscilla like seeds. She didn't know what would grow from them yet, but they felt important. True. She fell asleep that night with her phone in her hand, Sharon's words echoing in her mind. You get to decide who you are after this. Who did she want to be? That was the question she still couldn't answer. But at least now she was asking it honestly, without the distortion of Charlie's manipulation clouding her judgment. The reckoning had begun. But Priscilla was starting to understand that reckoning didn't just mean facing what she'd done wrong. It meant figuring out who she was underneath the roles she'd played, wife, mother, grandmother, and deciding if that person could coexist with the person she dreamed of becoming. The answer wouldn't come easy. But at least now, she was asking the right questions. 2 weeks before Christmas, Priscilla finally moved out of Michelle's guest room and into a small furnished apartment in Midtown Tulsa. Not the luxury hotel she'd stayed in during her liberation, and certainly not the Lincoln Park fantasy she'd imagined living with Charlie. Just a simple one-bedroom with functional furniture and beige walls that needed no decisions from her. She needed neutral. She needed quiet. She needed space to think without her daughter's worried glances or her grandchildren's confusion or the constant reminder of the family she'd almost destroyed. The divorce proceedings remained paused, suspended pending reconciliation discussions, in legal terms. Gladys Miller, her attorney, had been furious at first, convinced Duke's lawyers had manipulated Priscilla. But when Priscilla explained about Charlie, about the con, Gladys's fury had shifted to concern. Mrs. Robinson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest, Gladys had said during their last meeting. How much of your desire for divorce was yours, and how much was Charles Washington's influence? The question had haunted Priscilla because she didn't know the answer. Had she wanted to leave Duke before Charlie appeared? Or had Charlie simply given voice and permission to vague dissatisfactions she might have worked through otherwise? I don't know, Priscilla had admitted. I thought I was unhappy. But was I really? Or was I just bored? Restless? Looking for something to shake up a life that felt too predictable? That's what you need to figure out, Gladys said. Because if you genuinely want a divorce, if your marriage is truly over, then we proceed. But if you're divorcing because a con artist made you believe your life was empty without him in it, that's different. That's not agency, Mrs. Robinson. That's manipulation. Now, sitting in her sparse apartment with a cup of tea growing cold, Priscilla tried to untangle the threads of her own desires from Charlie's careful orchestration. She'd started seeing a therapist, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, recommended by Sharon Mitchell, and their twice-weekly sessions were slowly helping her understand the difference between genuine unhappiness and manufactured discontent. Tell me about your marriage before you met Charles, Dr. Okonkwo had asked in their first session. Not the highlights reel you tell your family. The real day-to-day truth. Priscilla had struggled to answer. 42 years was a long time, full of seasons and phases. The early years when Duke was building the business and she was raising babies, exhausting but purposeful. The middle years when the kids were in school and the business was thriving, busy but comfortable. The recent years, empty nest, routines established, peaceful but perhaps stagnant. We stopped growing, Priscilla had finally said. Or maybe I stopped growing and Duke didn't notice. He had the business, always expanding, always new projects. I had, what? Grandchildren to spoil, book club meetings, church committees. It felt small. Small can feel suffocating, Dr. Okonkwo had agreed. But Priscilla, did you tell Duke you felt this way? Before Charles Washington, before the divorce announcement, did you ever say, I feel stuck, I want more, I need something different? The answer was no. She'd never said it. She'd hinted, maybe, mentioned wanting to travel more, suggested they try new things. But she'd never been direct. Never vulnerable enough to say, I'm disappearing into this comfortable life and I need you to see me again. Why hadn't she? Pride? Fear? The assumption that after 42 years, Duke should just know? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. Duke. He'd been texting periodically since Thanksgiving, nothing heavy, just small check-ins. Hope you're doing okay. Saw your favorite coffee creamer at the store, wanted to let you know it's on sale. Jasmine asked if you're coming to her Christmas concert. This text read, would you be willing to meet for lunch? No pressure, no agenda. Just want to see how you're doing. Priscilla stared at the message for a long time. She'd avoided being alone with Duke since Thanksgiving, unsure of what to say, how to face the man she'd almost betrayed so completely. But maybe avoidance was its own form of cowardice. She typed back, okay. When and where? They met at the chalkboard, a quiet bistro in Brookside that neither of them had been to before, neutral territory. Duke arrived first, and Priscilla felt her breath catch when she saw him through the window. He'd gotten a haircut, was wearing a sweater she didn't recognize. He looked different somehow. Or maybe she was just seeing him with clear eyes for the first time in months. Priscilla, he said when she approached, standing like the gentleman his mother had raised. Thank you for coming. They ordered, both defaulting to safe choices, neither particularly hungry, and sat in awkward silence until the food arrived. Finally, Duke broke it. How are you really doing? He asked. And I don't want the polite answer. I want the truth. Priscilla set down her fork. I'm mortified. Ashamed. Angry at myself. Confused. Grateful that you stopped me before I destroyed everything. And... She hesitated, then continued, still not sure what happens next. Between us, I mean. Duke nodded slowly. That's honest. I appreciate that. He paused. Can I be honest too? Please. I'm hurt, Priscilla. More than I knew I could be hurt. When you walked out on Thanksgiving, when you announced you were divorcing me, it felt like the ground disappeared. 42 years, and I thought we were solid. Not perfect, but solid. Finding out you were so unhappy that you'd throw it all away, his voice cracked slightly, that cut deep. I know. I'm sorry. But here's the thing I've been thinking about, Duke continued. You weren't wrong about everything. You said I was boring, that I never made you feel special or excited. And you know what? You were right. Priscilla looked up, surprised. I got comfortable, Duke admitted. I built the business, provided for the family, showed up, and I thought that was enough. I thought you knew I loved you because I came home every night, because I was faithful, because I built something we could be proud of. But I stopped courting you, Priscilla. I stopped trying to win you. I stopped seeing you as a woman I desired and started seeing you as, I don't know, my partner. My co-parent. The person who'd always be there. I took you for granted. Tears pricked Priscilla's eyes. Duke. Let me finish, he said gently. You were wrong to handle it the way you did. The divorce announcement, the public humiliation, running off with a man you barely knew, that was wrong. But the feelings underneath? Being lonely in your own marriage? Wanting to feel seen and desired? Those were valid. And I'm sorry I didn't pay attention until it was almost too late. The apology hung between them, unexpected and transformative. Priscilla had expected anger, maybe forgiveness if she begged for it. She hadn't expected accountability. I should have talked to you, Priscilla said. Before Charlie, before the divorce idea even formed. I should have been brave enough to say, I'm not happy, we need to change something. Instead I built resentment silently and then exploded our lives. We both made mistakes, Duke said. The question is, can we fix them? I don't know, Priscilla answered honestly. Duke, you saved me from making a horrible mistake. I'm grateful for that. But gratitude isn't the same as being in love. And I don't know if I'm in love with you anymore. I don't know if I ever was, really, or if I just loved the security you provided. The words were brutal, but Duke didn't flinch. That's fair. And honest. So let me ask you something, do you want to find out? If there's something worth saving between us? How would we even do that? Duke pulled out his phone and showed her something, a booking confirmation for a marriage retreat in Colorado. 3 days, intensive counseling, outdoor activities, structured conversations. I signed us up for February, he said. If you're willing. No pressure to decide about the marriage before we go. Just, give us a chance to figure out if there's something worth fighting for. Can you do that? Priscilla looked at the booking, at the hopeful wariness in Duke's eyes, at the wedding ring he still wore after everything. She thought about Charlie's manufactured passion versus Duke's steady, imperfect love. She thought about Sharon Mitchell's words, you get to decide who you are after this. Okay, she said finally. I'll go to the retreat. The relief on Duke's face was palpable, but he didn't reach for her hand or try to act like everything was fixed. He just nodded. Thank you. That's all I'm asking for right now, a chance. They finished lunch with slightly easier conversation, talking about Marcus Jr.'s latest construction project, about Tamika's promotion at work, about Jasmine's Christmas concert. Normal family topics that felt simultaneously comfortable and foreign. As they left the restaurant, Duke paused. Priscilla. One more thing. If we do this, if we try to fix our marriage, I need you to be all in. Not because you're grateful or guilty or scared of being alone. Because you actually want to try. Can you promise me that? Priscilla thought about it carefully before answering. I can promise I'll be honest. About what I feel, what I want, what I'm struggling with. No more silent resentment. No more looking outside the marriage for what I should be asking for inside it. I can promise honesty. Is that enough? It's a start, Duke said. They parted with an awkward half-hug, and Priscilla drove back to her apartment feeling simultaneously lighter and more burdened. The Charlie chapter was closed. The police had issued a warrant for his arrest, though he'd vanished like smoke the moment Duke exposed him at Thanksgiving. But the Duke chapter? That remained unwritten, full of questions she wasn't sure she wanted to answer. Back in her apartment, Priscilla found herself doing something she hadn't done in months, looking through old photo albums. Not the digital ones on her phone, but the physical books she'd painstakingly assembled over decades. Wedding photos from 1983, she and Duke impossibly young, her in a dress with enormous sleeves that marked the era, him in a powder blue tuxedo that made her smile now. They looked terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Baby photos of Michelle, then Marcus Jr., then Tamika. Duke holding each newborn with such careful tenderness, like they might break. Priscilla exhausted but radiant in hospital beds. Birthday parties, first days of school, graduations. 42 years of life compressed into albums. She studied Duke's face across the decades. When had he stopped looking at her the way he did in their early photos? When had the adoration faded into comfortable familiarity? Or had she stopped looking for it, stopped seeing it because she was too busy with children and household management and being Mrs. Robinson, wife of Duke Robinson, instead of Priscilla? Her phone rang. Sharon Mitchell's name appeared on the screen. Sharon, hi, Priscilla answered. Hey, I was just checking in. You sounded off in your last text. Sharon's voice was warm, maternal despite being only a few years older than Priscilla. Want to talk about it? Priscilla found herself explaining the lunch with Duke, the marriage retreat, her confusion about what she actually wanted. Can I tell you something I learned the hard way? Sharon said when Priscilla finished. After Charles destroyed my life, after I lost everything, I spent months being angry at him. Then I spent months being angry at myself. But the anger that was hardest to work through? I was angry at my late husband, Tom. Your husband who died? Priscilla was confused. Yeah. Because I realized that part of why Charles's con worked so well was that Tom and I had stopped really seeing each other years before he got sick. We loved each other, but it was autopilot love. We didn't talk about real things anymore. We didn't dream together. We just existed side by side. When Tom died, I grieved him. But I also grieved the marriage we could have had if we'd been braver, if we'd been willing to be vulnerable with each other instead of just comfortable. So what are you saying? That I should leave Duke because we got comfortable? No, Sharon said firmly. I'm saying comfortable isn't the same as dead. Tom and I never got the chance to wake our marriage back up. You do. Duke's offering you that chance. The question is, do you want to take it? Or are you looking for permission to walk away because fixing it feels like too much work? The question struck like an arrow. Was that what she was doing? Looking for justification to leave because rebuilding felt harder than starting over? I don't know, Priscilla admitted. Then go to that retreat, Sharon advised. Go with an open heart and an honest tongue. See if there's something worth saving. But Priscilla, don't go out of guilt or obligation. Go because you owe it to yourself to know for sure. Because if you walk away without really trying, you'll always wonder. And wondering is its own kind of prison. After they hung up, Priscilla sat with Sharon's words. She pulled out her journal. Dr. Okonkwo had suggested she start writing to process her emotions, and began a list. Reasons I wanted to leave Duke. Felt invisible in my own marriage. Life felt predictable and small. Never felt passion or excitement. Duke never made me feel desired. I wanted adventure before I was too old. Wanted to feel young and alive again. She stared at the list, then started another. What Charlie actually gave me. Lies dressed up as passion. Manipulation disguised as attention. Financial exploitation masked as romance. Isolation from family presented as liberation. Near destruction of everything real in my life. The contrast was stark. But there was a third list she needed to make, and this one was hardest. What Duke actually gave me. 42 years of faithfulness. 3 children we raised together. Financial security I never had to worry about. A family legacy and business empire. Stability, even when it felt boring. Love, even when I couldn't feel it. Rescue, when I needed it most. Priscilla stared at that third list for a long time. It wasn't romantic. It didn't sound like the adventure she'd craved. But it was real. Substantial. Built on decades of choices and sacrifices and showing up. The problem was, she still didn't know if real and substantial was enough. Or if she was just trying to talk herself into settling again because the alternative, starting over at 63 with no money, no husband, and a humiliating public con in her past, was too frightening to contemplate. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Grandma, will you come to my Christmas concert? Please. I'm singing a solo and I want you there. I miss you. The message included a selfie of Jasmine making puppy dog eyes at the camera, her natural hair pulled into 2 puffs on either side of her head, her smile gap-toothed and precious. Priscilla typed back, I'll be there, baby. I promise. I miss you too. Another text came through, this time from Marcus Jr. Ma, I know things are complicated. But it's Christmas. Can we all just try to be a family for one day? The kids need that. Maybe we all do. Then Tamika, Mama, I'm not saying you have to decide about Daddy right now. But can you at least come to Christmas dinner? Please. For the grandkids if not for us. And finally, Michelle, Mom, I love you. Whatever you decide about the marriage, I'll support you. But don't let what Charlie did make you too scared to live. You wanted more from life, that wasn't wrong. How you went about it was wrong, but the desire wasn't. Don't shrink back into safe just because adventure turned out to be dangerous. Find a middle ground. And maybe that middle ground includes giving Daddy a real chance. Or maybe it doesn't. But figure it out honestly, okay? Priscilla read through her children's messages, feeling the pull of family, messy, complicated, hurt, but still there. Still reaching for her. Still wanting her. She thought about Charlie's words at Thanksgiving. The only interesting thing about you is your bank account. The cruelty of it still stung, but there was truth underneath. To Charlie, she'd been nothing but a mark. To Duke, even at his worst, she'd been a person. A partner. The mother of his children. Someone worth fighting for. That evening, Priscilla did something she hadn't done since before she'd met Charlie. She called Duke. Priscilla. He answered on the second ring, his voice worried. Is everything okay? I'm coming to Christmas dinner, she said. And Jasmine's concert. And Duke. I want to talk. Really talk. Not at a restaurant, not with attorneys present. Just us. Can we do that? When? He sounded cautiously hopeful. Tomorrow? Can you come to my apartment? I can do that. After they hung up, Priscilla cleaned her small apartment with nervous energy. She wasn't sure what she was going to say to Duke when he arrived. Wasn't sure if she was ready to commit to the marriage retreat or if she needed more time. But she knew she was tired of avoiding the hard conversations. Tired of making decisions out of fear or fantasy instead of truth. The next evening, Duke arrived at precisely 7 o'clock with a bottle of wine and a nervous expression that made him look younger than his 67 years. Come in, Priscilla said, feeling oddly formal in her own space. They sat on her small couch, not touching, careful to maintain distance, and for a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Priscilla broke the silence. I've been trying to figure out when I stopped being in love with you, she said. Or if I ever really was. And Duke, I think the truth is somewhere in between. I loved you. I still love you. But I'm not sure I was ever in love with you the way people talk about being in love. Not with butterflies and passion and feeling like I'd die if we weren't together. Duke nodded slowly. And that's what you were looking for with Charlie? That kind of love? I thought so. But I'm starting to think maybe that kind of love is a young person's game. Or maybe it's just a different thing than what builds a life. Priscilla struggled to articulate something she was still figuring out herself. I don't know if I believe in soulmates anymore, Duke. I think maybe there are just people you choose, and then you build a life with those choices. We chose each other at 21 and 25. But do we choose each other now? At 63 and 67? That's what I don't know. So how do we figure it out? Duke asked. Tell me something, Priscilla said. Why do you want to save this marriage? Really? Not because it's what's expected or because of the kids or because divorce is expensive. Why do you want me? Duke was quiet for a long time, thinking. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion Priscilla rarely heard from him. Because when I wake up in the morning, you're my first thought. Because when something good happens with the business, you're who I want to tell. Because when I see something beautiful, a sunset, a building design, a grandkid's artwork, my instinct is to share it with you. Because you know me better than anyone alive, and even when you're angry at me, you see me. He paused. And because I'm 67 years old, Priscilla. I don't have another 42 years to build something with someone else. But even if I did, I wouldn't want to. I want you. The you who's irritated that I leave my socks on the floor. The you who makes those humming noises when you're reading something interesting. The you who has strong opinions about which grandkid needs what kind of guidance. The you who walked out on Thanksgiving and broke my heart. I want all of it, because all of it is my life. You are my life. Priscilla felt tears streaming down her face. It wasn't a speech from a movie. It wasn't Charlie's smooth declarations. It was honest and imperfect and real. I don't have a speech like that, she admitted. I don't know if I feel that way about you. And Duke, is that fair to you? For you to love me more than I love you? Love isn't always equal, Duke said. Sometimes one person loves harder. Sometimes the balance shifts back and forth over the years. What matters is, are you willing to try? To go to that retreat, do the work, see if we can find something that works for both of us? Priscilla thought about Charlie's manufactured passion versus Duke's steady, unequal but genuine love. She thought about starting over at 63 versus rebuilding what she already had. She thought about her grandchildren and the life she'd almost destroyed and Sharon Mitchell's words about wondering being its own kind of prison. I'm willing to try, she said finally. But Duke, I need you to know, I might try and still decide to leave. The retreat might show us that we're better apart than together. Can you accept that possibility? I can accept it, Duke said, though pain flickered across his face. I'd rather know for sure than spend the rest of my life wondering if we could have made it work. They talked for hours that night, really talked, more honestly than they had in years. Duke admitted he'd let the business consume him, that he'd stopped pursuing her because he'd gotten lazy, that he'd taken her presence for granted. Priscilla admitted she'd built resentment instead of voicing needs, that she'd been looking for external validation instead of building internal fulfillment, that she'd almost destroyed everything because she was too proud to admit she was lonely. It wasn't romantic. There was no dramatic kiss, no declaration that everything was fixed. But it was honest, and honesty felt like foundation they could maybe build on. When Duke left that night, Priscilla sat in her quiet apartment and felt something she hadn't felt in months, not excitement or passion or the thrill of adventure, but something steadier. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. She texted Michelle, I'm coming to Christmas. And I'm giving Daddy a real chance. I don't know where it leads, but I'm going to find out. Michelle's response came quickly, that's all anyone can ask, Mama. That's all anyone can ask. Priscilla looked around her small apartment, temporary, neutral, safe. It had served its purpose, giving her space to think. But it wasn't home. She didn't know yet where home was, back with Duke in the house they'd shared for 40 years, or somewhere new, or alone. But she was ready to find out. The mirror she'd been avoiding for months was finally in front of her. And for the first time since Charlie had smiled at her across a dating app screen, Priscilla was ready to look honestly at her own reflection and decide who she wanted to be. Christmas Eve at the Robinson family home felt like walking into a memory wrapped in caution tape. The decorations were up. Michelle had insisted on maintaining traditions despite the family turmoil, but the joy felt forced. Priscilla arrived alone, parking in the driveway instead of pulling into the garage like she'd done for 42 years. Even that small detail felt significant, like she was a guest rather than a resident. Duke opened the door before she could knock, his face lighting up in a way that made her chest ache with guilt and confusion. "Priscilla. Come in. You look beautiful." She'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a burgundy dress she'd bought years ago but rarely worn. Not too formal, not too casual. Trying too hard without looking like she was trying at all. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and pine and all the Christmases that had come before. The grandchildren descended on her immediately, Jasmine wrapping around her waist, the older kids more reserved but clearly happy to see her. Marcus Jr. gave her a careful hug. Tamika kissed her cheek with tears in her eyes. Michelle squeezed her hand and whispered, "Thank you for coming." "Where have you been, Grandma?" 7-year-old Marcus IV asked with the bluntness of children. "Grandpa's been really sad." "Marcus." Tamika scolded, but Duke waved her off. "It's okay. He's not wrong." Duke looked at Priscilla. "I have been sad. But Grandma's here now, and that's what matters." They gathered in the living room for the traditional Christmas Eve activities, reading the nativity story, each family member sharing what they're grateful for, singing carols with Michelle's dubious piano accompaniment. Priscilla participated, but she felt like an actress in a play, hitting her marks but disconnected from the script. When it was her turn to share gratitude, the room fell silent. Everyone waited to hear what the woman who'd almost destroyed their family would say she was thankful for. "I'm grateful," Priscilla said slowly, "for second chances. For family that doesn't give up even when you give them every reason to. For being caught before I made a mistake I couldn't come back from. And," she looked at Duke, "for 42 years of a man showing up, even when I stopped noticing." Duke's eyes were wet. Several of the grandchildren looked confused. They still didn't fully understand what had happened, just that Grandma had been gone and now she was back, sort of. After the kids were put to bed, the adults gathered in Duke's study, the same room where this nightmare had begun with Priscilla's divorce announcement at Sunday dinner months ago. Now they sat in careful positions, Michelle and her husband on the love seat, Marcus Jr. in the leather chair, Tamika and her husband on the couch, Priscilla in the reading chair by the window, Duke standing by the fireplace like he was about to give a presentation. "We need to talk about what happens next," Marcus Jr. said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been holding things together. "The business, the family, all of it. Ma, I'm glad you're here, I'm glad you're trying with Dad. But we need to know, are you in or out? Because the uncertainty is killing us." "Marcus," Michelle started, but Priscilla held up a hand. "No, he's right. You all deserve to know where things stand." She took a breath. "Your father and I are going to a marriage retreat in February. 3 days of intensive counseling. After that, we'll make a decision about the marriage. Whether we're going to work on rebuilding or whether we're going to separate permanently." "So the divorce is still on the table," Tamika said, her voice small. "Yes," Priscilla admitted. "But so is reconciliation. I'm not making promises I might not keep. I'm just committing to figuring out the truth." "And what about the business?" Marcus Jr. pressed. "Your attorney was demanding financial disclosures that would have exposed proprietary information to competitors. That lawsuit could have tanked deals worth millions. Are we still dealing with that?" "I fired Gladys Miller 3 weeks ago," Priscilla said. "I have new representation, someone who's handling things more She searched for the word, reasonably. If your father and I divorce, we'll split assets fairly. But I'm not trying to destroy what he built anymore. I was. She struggled to admit this with all her children watching. I was being influenced by someone who didn't have our family's best interests at heart. Charlie, Tamika said flatly. The con man. Yes. The con man. Priscilla felt heat rise in her face. I was stupid. Vulnerable. Looking for something I thought I'd missed. And I almost let him destroy everything. You were lonely, Michelle said softly. Mama, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I remember times over the past few years where you seemed, I don't know, faded. Like you were going through motions. I should have asked you about it. We all should have. That's not your responsibility, Priscilla protested. Maybe not. But family takes care of family. And we got so used to you being the caretaker, the organizer, the glue holding everything together, that we forgot you might need taking care of too. Michelle looked at her father. Both of you. You both got so busy being parents and grandparents and business partners that you forgot to be married to each other. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Duke spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. Your sister's right. I take responsibility for my part in that. I got comfortable. Lazy, even. I stopped dating my wife, stopped pursuing her, stopped making her feel seen. I'm not excusing what your mother did, the way she handled things was wrong. But I understand better now where it came from. So what now? Marcus Jr. asked. We just pretend the last 3 months didn't happen. Go back to normal. There is no back, Duke said firmly. We can only go forward. And forward means your mother and I doing the work to either fix our marriage or end it with dignity. It means this family healing from the damage that's been done. It means you all, he looked at each of his children, figuring out how to forgive your mother, or at least understanding her, even if what she did hurt you. Do you forgive her? Tamika asked her father. Really? Duke looked at Priscilla, and she saw the complexity in his eyes. Love and hurt and anger and hope all tangled together. I'm working on it, he said honestly. Some days are easier than others. But I'm trying, because the alternative is bitterness, and I don't want to spend whatever years I have left bitter about the woman I spent my life loving. The raw honesty in the room was almost unbearable. Priscilla felt tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. To all of you. I'm sorry for the hurt I caused. For the chaos. For being so wrapped up in my own unhappiness that I almost destroyed this family. I don't know if I can fix it. I don't know if your father and I can make our marriage work. But I promise you, I will never again make major life decisions without thinking about how they impact all of you. And I will never, ever, let another man manipulate me into betraying the people I love. Michelle crossed the room and pulled her mother into a hug. Then Tamika joined, then even Marcus Jr., until Priscilla was surrounded by her children's embrace. Duke watched from the fireplace, his expression unreadable. When the children finally released her, Priscilla looked at her husband. Do you want to tell them, or should I? Tell us what? Marcus Jr. asked warily. Duke pulled an envelope from his pocket. Charles Washington was arrested yesterday in Kansas City. He was trying to run the same con on a woman there, but she got suspicious and called the police. When they ran his information, they found the warrant from Oklahoma. He's being extradited here to face charges. They caught him? Tamika breathed. They actually caught him? Thanks to your mother's willingness to press charges and give testimony, Duke said. And thanks to the other victims who've come forward since. The prosecutor thinks they have enough to put him away for 5 to 10 years. Good, Marcus Jr. said with feeling. He deserves worse. He does, Priscilla agreed. But at least he won't be able to hurt other women for a while. That has to be enough. They talked for another hour, about logistics, about holidays, about how to explain all this to the younger grandchildren. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest, and honesty felt like progress. As the evening wound down and the kids prepared to leave, Michelle pulled Priscilla aside in the kitchen. Mama, can I ask you something? And I want you to be really honest. Okay. Do you still love Daddy? Or are you just staying because leaving is too hard now? Priscilla measured her words carefully. I love him. But I don't know if I'm in love with him. And I'm trying to figure out if that distinction matters at our age, with our history. Is comfortable love enough? Or should I keep looking for passionate love, even if it's a fantasy? I think, Michelle said slowly, that maybe you're asking the wrong question. Instead of, am I in love, maybe ask, can I build a life with this person that makes us both happy? Because Mama, passionate love fades. Everyone says that. What's left is choice. Every day, you choose to show up or you don't. You choose to do the work or you don't. You and Daddy chose each other for 42 years. The question isn't whether you still feel butterflies. It's whether you're both willing to choose each other again, knowing everything you know now. The wisdom from her 40-year-old daughter struck Priscilla as both profound and slightly absurd. When had Michelle gotten so smart about marriage? When did you get so wise? Priscilla asked. I've been married 16 years, Mama. It's not always easy. James and I have had rough patches too. But we keep choosing each other. That's all marriage is, really. A series of choices to stay. After everyone left, it was just Priscilla and Duke in the house that had been their home for 3 decades. The awkwardness returned. Should she leave? Stay? Sit? Stand? Would you like some tea? Duke asked. I know you're probably tired, but I'm not ready for you to go yet. They sat in the kitchen with chamomile tea, the same kitchen where they'd planned birthday parties and discussed report cards and made breakfast for hungover college kids home for break. The memories were thick in the air. I've been thinking, Duke said, wrapping his hands around his mug, about what you said. About never feeling young and reckless. About missing out. Duke, you don't have to. Let me finish. You were right. We built a life focused on responsibility and stability and doing what was expected. And that was good. We raised good kids, built a good business, created something solid. But we never went to concerts, we never traveled spontaneously, we never did anything just because it sounded fun instead of sensible. I want to change that. He pulled out his phone and showed her something, Flight confirmations to New Orleans for New Year's Eve. 2 tickets. Leave the 30th, come back January 2nd. Jazz clubs, good food, walking around the quarter. No agenda, no plans, just us. Trying to have fun. If you want to come. Priscilla stared at the reservations. New Orleans, one of the places Charlie had taken her, but this time with Duke. The offer felt significant, like Duke was trying to reclaim that experience, to show her he could provide adventure too. What about the business? New Year's is usually when you. Marcus Jr. can handle it. The business will survive without me for a few days. You're more important. Duke looked at her earnestly. Priscilla, I can't give you back the years you feel like you missed. I can't make us 20 years old again. But I can try to make the years ahead different. Better. If you'll let me. It was exactly what she'd told Charlie she wanted: spontaneity, adventure, feeling alive. But coming from Duke, it felt different. Not like manipulation, but like genuine offering. Like he was stretching himself, trying to be something more than he'd been, because she mattered. Okay, Priscilla said softly. Let's go to New Orleans. Duke's smile was like sunrise. Yeah. But Duke? I need you to know, this doesn't fix everything. Going on a trip doesn't erase what happened or guarantee we'll make it. I know. But it's a start. And right now, I'll take any start we can get. Priscilla left that night instead of staying, but she left with plans. New Orleans at New Year's. The marriage retreat in February. Small steps towards something that might be reconciliation or might be closure, but at least it was movement. Driving back to her apartment, she thought about Michelle's words: marriage is a series of choices to stay. And Sharon Mitchell's wisdom: you get to decide who you are after this. She was choosing to try. Not from guilt or fear or obligation, but from curiosity. She wanted to know if she and Duke could build something new from the ashes of what they'd been. Wanted to know if comfortable love could transform into something more without the artificial passion of a con man's lies. The answer wouldn't come easy. But for the first time since Charlie had walked into her life with his dimples and empty promises, Priscilla felt like she was asking honest questions and seeking honest answers. And that, she was learning, was worth more than all the manufactured excitement in the world. The flight to New Orleans on December 30th felt surreal. Priscilla and Duke sat side by side in coach. Duke had asked if she wanted first class, but Priscilla had insisted on coach, not wanting him to think he needed to spend extravagantly to win her back, and the proximity was both familiar and foreign. 42 years of marriage, countless family trips, and yet this felt like a first date. Nervous? Duke asked as the plane took off. Terrified, Priscilla admitted. This feels like a test we might fail. Then let's not think of it as a test. Let's think of it as exploration. We're exploring whether we can have fun together. Whether we can be more than parents and business partners. Whether there's something underneath all those roles worth building on. The hotel Duke had booked was in the French Quarter, not the ostentatious luxury Charlie had favored, but a charming boutique place with wrought iron balconies and century-old character. Their room had exposed brick walls and French doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking Royal Street. It's beautiful, Priscilla said, stepping onto the balcony where street musicians were already setting up below. I remembered you saying once, years ago, maybe 20 years, that you wanted to see New Orleans during Jazz Fest. We never made it. So I thought, maybe New Year's is close enough. The fact that he'd remembered a passing comment from decades ago touched something in Priscilla. Charlie had pretended to care about her dreams. Duke had apparently been listening to them all along. They spent the afternoon wandering the quarter with no agenda, exactly what Duke had promised. They stopped in art galleries where Priscilla admired paintings while Duke studied the architecture of the buildings. They listened to street musicians, dropping bills in open guitar cases. They ate beignets at Café du Monde, getting powdered sugar everywhere and laughing like tourists. When was the last time we laughed together? Priscilla asked, licking sugar from her fingers. Duke considered the question seriously. I don't know. That's sad, isn't it? We raised 3 funny kids. We have hilarious grandchildren. But you and me? I can't remember the last time we just laughed. That evening, they went to Preservation Hall for traditional jazz. The music was alive in a way that made Priscilla's heart ache, drums and trumpet and piano weaving together an improvisation that felt both chaotic and perfectly synchronized. Duke reached for her hand during a particularly moving number, and Priscilla let him hold it. After the show, walking back through the lamplit streets, Duke asked the question Priscilla had been dreading. Did you come here with him? With Charlie? She could have lied. Could have spared Duke the pain. But they'd promised honesty. Yes. In October. He brought me to New Orleans for a weekend. We stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, ate at Commander's Palace, did all the expensive, impressive things. She paused. It felt magical at the time. Now it just feels like part of the con. Expensive dates to make me feel special, so I'd be more willing to hand over my money later. Does being here with me ruin it? The city, I mean. Does it feel tainted? No, Priscilla said, surprising herself with the truth of it. It feels like reclaiming it. Like making new memories that are real instead of manufactured. They had dinner at a small Creole restaurant recommended by the hotel concierge. Nothing fancy, just good food and better atmosphere. Over jambalaya and etouffee, they talked about things they'd never discussed in 42 years of marriage. What would you have done? Priscilla asked. If you hadn't married me at 25. If you'd had more time to be young and single. What would you have done? Duke thought about it. Traveled, probably. I had this dream of backpacking through Europe, working construction jobs in different countries, learning how they built things. My dad thought it was foolish, told me to get serious, start a business, build something. So I did. Married you, started the company, became responsible. I never regretted it, exactly. But I do wonder sometimes what that other life might have looked like. Do you resent me? For being the reason you stayed? No. You were never the reason I stayed. I was. I made that choice. Just like you made the choice to stay when maybe part of you wanted to leave. He reached across the table for her hand. Priscilla, I think we both spent 42 years doing what we thought we were supposed to do. Being who we thought we were supposed to be. The question is, who do we want to be now? It was the same question Sharon Mitchell had posed. You get to decide who you are after this. I don't know who I want to be, Priscilla admitted. I know who I don't want to be anymore. I don't want to be invisible. I don't want to be just Duke's wife, or the kid's mom, or the grandkid's grandmother. I want to be Priscilla. But I'm not sure I know who that is without all those roles. Then maybe that's what we figure out together, Duke suggested. Maybe we both get to reinvent ourselves. Not by leaving each other, but by giving each other permission to be more than what we've been. That night, back in their hotel room with the sounds of Bourbon Street drifting through the open balcony doors, they faced the elephant in the room, sleeping arrangements. The room had one bed. I can sleep on the couch, Duke offered immediately. Don't be ridiculous. We've shared a bed for 42 years. But even as she said it, Priscilla felt awkward. Sharing a bed felt intimate in a way they hadn't been in months. They got ready for bed in careful silence, Priscilla in the bathroom, Duke changing in the room. When she emerged in her nightgown, Duke was already under the covers on his side, giving her plenty of space. They lay in the darkness, the neon glow from the street painting shadows on the ceiling. Priscilla. Duke's voice was soft in the dark. Yeah? Did you love him? Charlie? The question hung in the air. Priscilla thought about how to answer honestly. I thought I did. In the moment, it felt real. The excitement, the attention, the feeling of being seen, I confused that with love. But now? I think I was in love with how he made me feel about myself, not with him as a person. Does that make sense? Yeah. It does. Duke was quiet for a moment. Do you love me? I do. But Duke. She struggled to articulate this. I'm not sure I'm in love with you. I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. Is loving someone enough? Or does there need to be more? I think, Duke said carefully, that being in love is what gets you to the altar. But loving someone, choosing them every day, building a life with them, showing up when it's hard, that's what keeps you together. Maybe at 21 you needed to be in love. At 63? Maybe you just need to love. And be loved. And be willing to work towards something better. They fell asleep like that, not touching, but not separate either. Somewhere in the middle of the night, Priscilla woke to find Duke's hand had found hers, their fingers loosely intertwined. She didn't pull away. New Year's Eve was magical in a way Priscilla hadn't expected. They spent the day exploring the Garden District, the streetcar line, a steamboat cruise on the Mississippi. Duke was relaxed in a way she rarely saw him, not checking his phone every 5 minutes, not thinking about the business. Just present. That evening, they went to a jazz club in the Marigny neighborhood for the New Year's Eve celebration. The music was electric, the crowd diverse and joyful, and for the first time in months, Priscilla felt purely happy. Not escaping something, not running towards something, just happy. At midnight, surrounded by strangers counting down, Duke pulled Priscilla close. Can I kiss you? He asked, and the permission-seeking felt significant. He wasn't assuming. He was asking. Yes, she said. The kiss was sweet and tentative and nothing like Charlie's calculated seductions. It was a kiss from a man who knew her, every line on her face, every gray hair, every imperfection, and wanted her anyway. Not because she was an exciting fantasy, but because she was real. When they pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. "I want to try," Priscilla whispered. "Really try. Not just go to the retreat, not just go through motions. I want to see if we can build something new. Something that works for both of us?" Duke asked. "Something that works for both of us." They danced until 2 a.m., Duke's moves awkward but enthusiastic, Priscilla laughing at his attempts to keep rhythm. They walked back to their hotel through streets still full of celebrants, and for the first time in months, Priscilla felt like she was walking towards something instead of running away. In their hotel room, emboldened by champagne and hope and the feeling of new beginnings, Priscilla did something she hadn't done in years. She initiated intimacy with her husband. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the passionate fantasy she'd experienced with Charlie. But it was real and tender and filled with 42 years of knowing each other's bodies and hearts. And afterward, lying in Duke's arms with dawn breaking over the French Quarter, Priscilla realized something profound. Passion was easy. Anyone could manufacture passion with the right words and gestures and manipulation. But intimacy, real intimacy, built on decades of shared life and genuine knowledge of another person, that was rare. Valuable. Worth fighting for. "Duke," she said into the quiet morning. I think I want to come home. Not just for the retreat. Home. Back to our house, our life. If you'll have me." She felt Duke's arms tighten around her. His voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. "Are you sure? I don't want you coming back just because the trip was nice. I want you to be sure." "I'm not sure about everything," Priscilla admitted. "I'm not sure we'll make it. I'm not sure I won't have days where I regret choosing safety over adventure. But I'm sure that I want to try. I'm sure that what we have, what we've built and what we could rebuild, is worth more than fantasies and con men and trying to recapture youth that's gone." They flew home on January 2nd as different people than they'd been when they left. Not fixed, they both understood there was still work to do, but hopeful. Ready to do the hard work of rebuilding. When they pulled into the driveway of the house they'd shared for 30 years, Priscilla didn't park on the street. She pulled into the garage, into her spot, and turned off the engine. "Welcome home," Duke said simply. "I'm home," Priscilla echoed. And February arrived cold and clear, bringing with it the marriage retreat Duke had booked months ago in the Colorado mountains. Priscilla had moved back into their home in mid-January, but they'd maintained separate bedrooms at the advice of Dr. Okonkwo, who said rebuilding required intentionality rather than simply falling back into old patterns. The arrangement was awkward. Michelle had joked they were like Victorian aristocrats with separate chambers, but it forced them to be deliberate about intimacy rather than automatic. Every kiss, every touch, every conversation had to be chosen rather than assumed. The retreat center was in Estes Park, nestled against Rocky Mountain National Park. 12 couples, all at various stages of marital crisis, gathering to either save their marriages or end them with dignity. The facilitators, Dr. Raymond and Dr. Lucia Chen, a married couple who'd been running these retreats for 20 years, were warm but direct. "We're not here to tell you to stay together," Dr. Raymond said during the opening session. "We're here to help you figure out what you actually want, why you want it, and whether it's achievable." Some of you will leave here recommitted. Some will leave with clarity that divorce is the right choice. Both outcomes are valid. The 3 days were intense. Morning sessions focused on communication, learning to speak honestly without weaponizing truth. Afternoon sessions involved activities designed to rebuild trust and intimacy. Evening sessions were couple-specific, working through individual issues with private counselors. During one morning session, Dr. Lucia had each partner write down their biggest resentment about their spouse, then read it aloud. Priscilla wrote, "I resent that you stopped seeing me as a woman and only saw me as a role to fill." Duke wrote, "I resent that you never told me you were unhappy until you were already leaving." Reading them aloud was painful. But Dr. Lucia pushed deeper. "Priscilla, when did Duke stop seeing you as a woman?" Priscilla thought about it. "I don't know. Gradually, maybe. After the kids came, after the business took off. I became the person who handled things rather than the person he pursued." "Did you tell him you wanted to be pursued?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I thought he should just know. Because asking for it felt like begging. Because I thought if he really loved me, he'd want to without being told." Dr. Lucia turned to Duke. "When did you start taking Priscilla for granted?" "Probably after the business stabilized. The first 10 years were a struggle, working 80-hour weeks, barely making ends meet. Priscilla held everything together at home. Once things got easier financially, I guess I thought I'd earned the right to coast. To just exist rather than trying so hard." "So you both made assumptions," Dr. Raymond observed. Priscilla assumed Duke should intuitively know her needs without her voicing them. Duke assumed his financial provision was sufficient demonstration of love. Both of you stopped doing the work of marriage and started autopiloting. Does that sound accurate? It was painfully accurate. One afternoon activity particularly challenged them. Each couple had to plan a dream day for their partner based solely on what they knew their spouse enjoyed, not what they themselves would want to do, but what would genuinely make their partner happy. Duke's plan for Priscilla involved a pottery class followed by lunch at a bookstore cafe, then an afternoon at a modern art museum, ending with dinner at a small Ethiopian restaurant and dancing at a jazz club. Priscilla stared at the itinerary, shocked. "You remembered I wanted to try pottery. I mentioned that once, maybe 5 years ago." "I remember lots of things," Duke said quietly. "I just stopped acting on them. Stopped prioritizing making you happy." Priscilla's plan for Duke involved a morning hike to a mountain overlook, lunch at a barbecue spot, an afternoon visiting a historic construction site with a guided architecture tour, an evening watching football with his favorite snacks. "You hate football," Duke said, surprised. "I hate watching it alone while you yell at the TV," Priscilla corrected. "But I don't actually mind the game when you explain what's happening. You just stopped explaining years ago, stopped trying to include me." The realization hit them both. They hadn't forgotten how to love each other. They'd just gotten lazy about doing it. The hardest session came on day 2, when Dr. Lucia addressed infidelity and betrayal. Though Priscilla hadn't physically cheated, Charlie had been caught before it reached that point. The emotional betrayal was real. "Duke, your wife pursued another man. She planned to leave you for him. She would have liquidated your assets and started a new life. How does that make you feel?" "Devastated," Duke admitted, his voice raw. Betrayed. Like 42 years meant nothing. Like I was so inadequate that she'd rather destroy everything than talk to me. Priscilla, you nearly threw away your marriage, your family relationships, your financial security for a man who turned out to be a con artist. How does that make you feel? Humiliated. Stupid. Like everyone was right to think I was crazy. Priscilla wiped tears from her eyes. But also still angry that I was so unhappy in my marriage that a con man's lies felt preferable to my reality. Dr. Lucia leaned forward. That's important. Priscilla, Charlie was a con artist, yes. But he succeeded because you were vulnerable. Duke's neglect, not abuse, not cruelty, but simple neglect and assumption, created the opening Charlie exploited. Do you understand that, Duke? Your wife's foolishness doesn't erase your culpability in creating conditions where she felt invisible enough to be susceptible. Duke nodded slowly. I do. I've been thinking about it constantly. I keep asking myself, if I'd been paying attention, if I'd been pursuing her, making her feel valued, would Charlie have even registered to her? Probably not, Dr. Lucia said bluntly. Priscilla, do you accept responsibility for your choices? For how you handled your unhappiness? Yes. I should have talked to Duke. Should have suggested counseling, should have been brave enough to voice my needs. Instead, I built resentment silently and then exploded our lives. That was wrong. That hurt people I love. I own that. Good. You both own your parts. Now the question is, can you both change the patterns that led here? That evening, during their private couples session, Dr. Chen asked the question that had been hovering over everything. Do you want to stay married? Duke answered immediately. Yes. I love my wife. I want to build something better with her. Priscilla hesitated. Dr. Chen didn't rush her. I want to stay married, Priscilla finally said. I don't want to be someone who gives up after one crisis. I don't want to be someone who runs away when things get hard. But I also don't want to stay just because leaving is scary or because I feel guilty. I want to stay because it's right. And I'm not completely sure yet that it is. What would make you sure? Dr. Chen asked. I don't know. Maybe proof that we can actually change? That this isn't just a temporary fix that will fade once we're back in our normal routine? Dr. Chen nodded. That's fair. Duke, how do you feel about Priscilla's uncertainty? It hurts, Duke admitted. I'm all in, and she's still got one foot out the door. But I also understand it. I broke her trust by taking her for granted for years. She broke mine by almost leaving me for a con man. Trust takes time to rebuild. I'm willing to give her that time. On the final day of the retreat, each couple wrote a marriage mission statement, a document outlining what they wanted their marriage to look like going forward, what they committed to doing differently, and what their deal breakers were. Priscilla and Duke's statement included what we commit to. Weekly date nights, no phones, no kids/grandkids discussion. Annual trips, just the two of us. Daily check-ins about how we're really feeling. Speaking up when needs aren't being met. Regular couples counseling, even when things are good. Pursuing each other intentionally, not assuming love is enough. Deal breakers. Infidelity, emotional or physical. Financial deception. Violence or abuse. Refusing to work on issues when they arise. Making unilateral major life decisions. Reading it aloud to the group felt like wedding vows, version 2.0. Not the naive promises of 21 and 25, but the hard-won commitments of 63 and 67. This is what you're building, Dr. Raymond said. Not the marriage you had. A new one. Better, hopefully. More intentional. The question is, are you both willing to do the work? I am, Duke said. I am, Priscilla echoed, and this time, she meant it without reservation. On the drive home from Colorado, they talked about practical next steps. Priscilla would move back into their shared bedroom. They'd plan their first official post-reconciliation date night. They'd tell the family that they were committed to making it work. What about Charlie? Duke asked as they crossed into Oklahoma. The trial starts in April. Are you ready for that? Priscilla had been dreading the trial, the publicity, the testimony, the rehashing of her foolishness for a courtroom. But Sharon Mitchell had agreed to testify too, and the prosecutor said they had 4 other victims willing to come forward. Together, they might actually put Charlie away for a significant time. I'm ready, Priscilla said firmly. I'm ready to face it. To own what happened and make sure he can't do this to anyone else. It's going to be humiliating, but I think I need to do it. Not just for other women, but for myself. To stop hiding from what I almost did. Duke reached over and squeezed her hand. I'll be there. Every day of the trial. Right there in the courtroom with you. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You're facing your mistakes. The least I can do is support you while you do it. They arrived home to find their family had decorated the house with a "Welcome Home" banner. Michelle, Marcus Jr., and Tamika had organized a family dinner, not a celebration exactly, but an acknowledgement. Their marriage wasn't fixed, but it was being rebuilt, and that was worth recognizing. Over pot roast and the laughter of grandchildren who were just happy to have Grandma and Grandpa acting normal again, Priscilla felt something settle in her chest. Not passion. Not excitement. But something steadier and more valuable, belonging. After dinner, Duke stood and clinked his glass for attention. The family quieted. I want to say something, he began. These past few months have been the hardest of my life. Your mother and I came very close to losing everything. But we've been doing the work, real, hard, uncomfortable work, to build something better. We're not the same people we were 4 months ago. And our marriage won't be the same either. It'll be more intentional. More honest. And hopefully, more fulfilling for both of us. He looked at Priscilla. I failed your mother in many ways. I got comfortable when I should have stayed attentive. I assumed when I should have asked. I provided financial security but forgot to provide emotional connection. I'm committed to doing better. And I hope you'll all hold me accountable when you see me slipping. Priscilla stood as well, her heart pounding. And I failed all of you. I almost destroyed this family because I was too proud to admit I was unhappy, too scared to do the work of fixing my marriage, and too susceptible to manipulation from someone who saw my vulnerability as an opportunity. I'm ashamed of that. But I'm also grateful that Duke caught me before I fell completely, grateful that you all loved me enough to fight for me even when I didn't deserve it, and grateful for the chance to do better. She looked around the table at her children and grandchildren. I want you all to learn from my mistakes. If you're unhappy, say so. If your marriage needs work, do the work before it's too late. Don't wait until you're so desperate for change that you'll accept any change, even destructive ones. And never, ever let someone isolate you from the people who really love you. We love you, Grandma, Jasmine said simply, breaking the heavy moment with the clarity of children. I love you too, baby. All of you. The evening ended with the usual chaos of grandkids being rounded up for bedtime, coats being gathered, hugs being distributed. But there was a lightness to it that hadn't existed before, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they'd survived the storm. That night, lying in their shared bed for the first time in months, Priscilla felt Duke's arms around her and realized something profound. The fantasy she'd chased with Charlie, the excitement, the passion, the feeling of being young again, had been just that. A fantasy. A mirage that disappeared the moment she touched it. But this? Duke's steady breathing, his familiar warmth, the security of knowing someone truly knew her and chose her anyway. This was real. Imperfect, sometimes boring, often challenging, but real. Duke, she whispered into the darkness. Yeah. Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on us. I could never give up on you, Priscilla. You're my whole world. You always have been. I just forgot to tell you often enough. Tell me now. And he did, in words and in touch, in presence and in promise. It wasn't the manufactured passion of a con artist's script. It was the deep, abiding love of two people who'd walked through fire and chosen to walk forward together. For the first time in months, Priscilla fell asleep feeling completely at peace. The journey wasn't over, they still had counseling sessions ahead, still had the trial to face, still had years of rebuilding to do. But they were walking the path together, and that made all the difference.